AITA for going no contact with my birth family as soon as I turned 18, even though my adoption was always open. I, 18M, was adopted at birth by my parents. They went through an adoption agency for me like they did for my sister, 20F. I have a brother, 23M, who was also adopted but through foster care instead. My brother didn't have any contact with his birth family. My sister had regular contact with hers, and we're all pretty close to them, and they're great people. She'd see both her bio sides a few times a year and had calls with them regularly. With my birth family, it was a yearly visit with monthly phone calls. When I got a little older, there were invites sent for me to join for certain family functions, but I always turned those down. And the thing about it all is I have never felt connected to my birth family, and I don't consider them my family either. Like my birth family, yes, but to me, I don't know how to describe it exactly. I know I come from them, that I wouldn't exist without them, and that I'll always be related to them through DNA. On the other hand, my adoptive family are the family I love and think of as actual family. And since I'm being honest, I should say that I had wanted to cut ties with my birth family for years. But I didn't want to make things difficult when I was under 18. I know there are people who judge me for that. I'm in some adoption forums, and I get judged pretty harshly for rejecting my bios, and especially for not wanting a good relationship with my bio siblings. They're all full too, which is a little different from most, but angers some other adoptees I've connected with who feel like I should see them as siblings just as much as my siblings from my adopted family. But anyway, some stuff about my birth family has always annoyed me. I compare them a lot to my sister's family because she's still in contact with hers and close to them, and so are the rest of us. She's had a good relationship going there and always will most likely. But her birth parents never acted like they could overrule our parents. They never got weird with our parents. Her half-siblings were cool about her having me and our brother. She never got shit for calling us her brothers and saying her half-siblings were family instead of saying siblings. Her extended birth families never bitched about her missing stuff they threw for their family or how they weren't invited to every single thing. When my sister graduated high school and she wanted to do an intimate family celebration with just our family and a bigger celebration with everyone also, there was no drama. So I consider hers the best kind of open adoption. I don't feel like that about mine. My birth parents stayed together unlike my sister's. They weren't as open about stuff as hers were either. My sister knows her birth parents were thinking of her and how they wouldn't be able to get their shit together, and her extended families weren't in the best place for it. They even wrote a letter for her and another for our parents expressing all they wanted for her was the best. They even bought her a stuffy to always have with her. It wasn't a huge thing, but it was something they wanted her to have, so she'd feel like she wasn't just given away. With mine, they only ever said I came at a bad time because they were in college. But with how they act, I think they saw giving me up as temporary. I think their families wanted me in their lives too, but not to be a part of keeping me in the family. What I remember most is how, during visits, my birth parents would seem annoyed if my parents were correcting me for something or being affectionate with me. They tried to parent me, which was weird because I talked to them more, but I only saw them once a year. My birth parents loved to say they were my parents. They'd call me their son and got upset when I was called my parent's son. They'd also be upset that I didn't enjoy alone time with them and their kids like they wanted, and I always wanted my parents and siblings back. There were some talks with my parents and birth parents that I was never involved in, but my birth parents would be so angry after them. Their kids were always so jealous of my relationship with my siblings. I don't even remember the number of times I was told by their kids that I was their sibling and not my actual sibling, or that I was told I shouldn't talk to my siblings in front of them because it made them sad. One year my birth family visited us, and it got super weird because my birth parents' kids were super annoyed at some of the photos of me and my siblings and wanted to recreate them with me and wanted those to replace the ones at home. My extended birth families complained about not being invited to my birth parties or not being allowed to host their own for me where I'd fly out. But they wanted me alone. There was weddings. Then it was how mad they were that I took part in a tradition on my mom's side to add a recipe to a family cookbook and make it with my grandma. There was a lot of cyber stalking going on and grumbling. A lot of the calls I had with them were the same where they'd bring up stuff I'd done with my family and kind of whine about it. I got asked a lot why I didn't call the mom and dad and grandma and grandpa and stuff. But anyway, I started waiting for the day I could end contact with them, and it came in November. I don't answer their calls anymore, and I expressed that I won't be visiting this summer either and don't want them to visit. There's been a lot of backlash. My parents wanted me to let them deal with it, but I don't want it misunderstood. This isn't my parents' decision. It's mine, and I'll be pissed, not them, if my birth family tries to show up or anything. The biggest thing I'm getting via DMs on socials that I had to make private and text, which made me change my number after blocking didn't work, is that I have a whole-ass family who wants me and to think of the kids involved. My bio siblings especially because they miss me and they're so young and stuff. AITA for calling my stepdad arrogant and a liar for saying he's not a stepdad but the dad who stepped up and the dad we needed. My parents divorced 13 years ago. I'm 17M, their oldest kid, and then there's my two sisters, 15F, 14F. Our parents share custody of us. Both show up for us. Both support us in extracurriculars and pay for our things and provide for us. My dad was always around, and he never acted like a deadbeat dad. When I was 7, my mom met her husband, and they got married after dating for like 5 months or something crazy like that. At first, I thought he was okay. My sisters never liked him much. My youngest sister used to cry every time he tried to pick her up or interact with her. But Mom married him anyway. It was like 2 months after they got married when my stepdad told someone he wasn't a stepdad, but the dad who stepped up. He said the 3 of us had needed a dad, and he was glad to rise to the occasion. I asked my mom why he said that when we had a dad. She said people think less of stepparents for some weird reason, and he wanted it clear that he was our dad too. I said it sounded like we didn't have a dad though. She told me it wasn't like that. The next time he said I told my stepdad it bothered me, and he said he was just so damn proud to be our dad. I said he wasn't dad though, and he was Greg. I was punished for saying that, and Mom told me it's wrong to scream at a step-parent, "You're not my mom or dad," and it hurt feelings. I hadn't screamed, but my mom said it didn't matter if you screamed it or said it, because it was hurtful. I ended up telling Dad about it, and my sisters did too when they realized what he was saying. Our dad talked to our mom, but I don't think she cared about his feelings. I told him about it a few more times, and I remember my mom and stepdad being so pissed at Dad all of a sudden, so I guess he tried to make a bigger deal out of it. My stepdad started saying it more, Mom started saying it too, and posted it on social a lot. It got on our nerves a lot, and my sister's dislike for him spread to all 3 of us over time. So much that now, I'm only going to Mom's house because my sisters have to since they're under 17, and that's the age where our choice has some weight in court. I could stop going, but I decided to stand by my sisters until I'm 18. It's been painful, but at least we can vent to each other easier. My mom and stepdad had some friends over at the weekend, and my stepdad started his BS off again when one of his friend's stepkids told his friend that he wasn't his dad and to go away. My stepdad was like, "Oh, don't worry, and eventually they'll realize without you they won't have a dad, and you're the dad he needs," speaking from experience and all that bullshit. He said neither one of them was stepdads because they were actually the dads who stepped up and were needed by the kids. I got so mad hearing him say that shit again, and I called him arrogant and a liar. I said we didn't need him, and if anything, he made our lives worse. I said my sisters never liked him, and I eventually saw why, and he needed to accept that he didn't do more for us than our dad. He wasn't more involved, or even equally as involved, and that he was never going to be appreciated or wanted like he believed, and he needed to stop fucking up other people's relationships with their stepkids by filling their heads with such BS. I also said he has his own kids now and should focus on them instead of us, because he'll never get his ego stroked like he wants to. Of course, I got into trouble for my outburst, and I was basically grounded until I got to my dad's house. My mom blamed my dad for it, and said he filled our heads with disrespect for her husband, and it made me feel bad that Dad was getting blamed. So I wonder if I'm TA for saying all that instead of letting it go?
AITA for hating my engagement ring? I, 29F, got engaged to my fiancé, 30M, after 2 years of dating and 15 years of knowing each other. He is super sweet, kind, supportive, and very family-oriented. His parents love me, and my parents love him. There was absolutely no drama in our relationship until now. I knew that he had been looking to settle down and be married, and he knew I was too. We just kind of have always known, even for those 15 years, that this was going to happen. Hard to fight the gut feeling. Because we were talking so much about getting married, he wanted to take me engagement ring browsing so that he could see what styles I liked and didn't like. When I suggested we go to an outlet jewelry shop cause I know he wouldn't want to spend a fortune on it, and I didn't want anything super expensive or extravagant either. The one and only rule I told him was that I only wanted traditional diamonds. No offense to those who like more colorful rings, but I prefer to be a little more traditional. I put on many rings that all were very similar, just one simple diamond and a strap. I tried to try on ones that were no more than $1,000. I thought that was generally reasonable. Months later he proposes and I start to cry from the joy, and after I say yes, he opens the box. And in the box was a small greenish-brownish colored diamond with extremely tiny traditional diamonds around it. I was disappointed, but put on a big fake smile and tried to erase it from my mind so I could let the excitement of the moment continue. After about maybe 30 minutes, I went ahead and asked about the ring. I asked what kind of diamond it was, and he said it was called a moss diamond, and he'd choose it for me because turquoise was my favorite color, and it was the closest he could find. I wanted to say, what about my one rule of traditional diamond only, but I also didn't want to be ungrateful, so I didn't ask. I asked him if he had gotten it at the outlet shop we went to, and he said he had gotten it off Etsy. My MOH ladder told me that Etsy made good quality jewelry, so that perked me up a bit. I decided to just kind of let it be, and accept the ring, and learn to love and attach memories to it. Getting to the drama. This whole process has kind of made me realize how cheap he is. I don't mind when someone knows how to stretch a dollar, but to me there's a difference between frugal and cheap. When I look back at all our dates, his gifts, and everything, it kind of clicked in me that all of them had either been cheap or a free gift from a friend that he decided to give to me. The gifts he has given to me during our relationship were just because he found them for free or someone sold it for an extremely cheap price. For one of my birthdays, he ended up getting us tickets to this massive local ball and getting us ballroom dancing classes before the ball started. I showed no interest in ballroom dancing, but I thought it was a fun idea to go, and we had a generally good time. I thanked him and asked him how he found out about this. He told me originally his friend was going to go with his girlfriend, but couldn't make it, so they gave us the tickets. So basically the ball, our food, our drinks, our dance lesson, and even my corsage was all free. And there's more cheap and free stories where that came from. And when I look back at things, whenever we did do something extravagant, it was always on my dime. He is not rich, but he is certainly not poor. He makes pretty decent money. The thing that I think made me finally break was our Valentine's Day plans. He had told me he was going to take me to the biggest landmark of our city, which is expensive to just even set foot in, and they had a restaurant inside that was ridiculously expensive. I was amazed and even said, "Are you sure? You know that place is expensive, right?" He said that he knew it was one of my bucket list things to do and said I deserved it. It meant so much to me that he was willing to do this, and I was so excited. A few days later, I found that there was going to be a wedding convention in our town. I bought our tickets, $15 each plus one for my mom and maid of honor. I told him about it, and he said, "Great. It's better to spend our money there than on that restaurant." I was so confused. I told him they weren't on the same day. In fact, they were a week apart, and that I already had bought the tickets, and he didn't need to buy anything there so he wouldn't have to worry about spending any money at the convention. He said, "No, it's better to save our money, so let's not go to the landmark/restaurant." My mind was blown. I couldn't believe he canceled my dream plans over something that had absolutely nothing to do with the plans. I talked to my MOH about it, and she said she has always noticed he was a bit cheap. On to the ring now. I never looked at my ring on Etsy to try to find it or ask for the price, cause I thought it was rude to look up or ask. But because of all this craziness, I decided to go on Etsy and find my ring. There were surprisingly many moss diamond rings to look through, but I eventually found it. The ring was being sold for $28. Honestly, my heart kinda broke. I started saying stupid dramatic things in my head like, am I only worth $28? I want to confront him about this, but I might be a AH here for just letting this get to me. Ick. WIPTA for confronting him about this? Update 1. I'll go ahead and answer some of y'all's questions and comments. No, my finger has not turned green yet. Surprisingly, LOL. Believe me though, I do check once in a while. Here's a bit of info on his financial life and history. He grew up as one of 7 siblings with parents who financially struggled to get by. He definitely grew up learning how to stretch a dollar. Currently, even though I know he can afford a lot more, he rents a cheap studio apartment in a sketchy part of town where when I come to visit, he will come down and walk me from my car to his room for safety. His apartment has basically no decorations outside of old comic book posters. All his furniture and household appliances, etc., I can guarantee are all secondhand or bought from Goodwill. He almost never eats out, and when he does, it's always a small meal from Jack in the Box where he is willing to spring for a milkshake. In terms of what he does with all his money that he does not spend, I'm not sure. I never asked because I always thought that it was rude to ask people where they put their money, but now that we're engaged, I guess I have every right to ask where it goes to, LOL. Here's a bit on my financial life and history. I grew up an only child with parents who owned a small business who never had to struggle for money. We were not rich, but I would call us upper middle class. If I needed something expensive for a project or for school, it was easy for my parents to get it. I was not spoiled though. There were plenty of times my parents would tell me no, and would only buy expensive things for me if I really needed them. As an adult, I make a pretty good living. I did not go to college, so thankfully I'm in no debt. I have career in the field I always wanted to be in, and I'm hoping that soon it will be growing even bigger. I don't think I make more than my fiancé though. I could be wrong. I currently live in an apartment complex in a safe part of town and decorate my apartment nicely. All my decorations though were not expensive. I do eat out probably a little more than I should, but it's not like I go to Cheesecake Factory every day. It's more like I'll get Chick-fil-A or Chipotle or get a pre-made meal from Target every other day on my way to work. Here's some more important info that maybe I should have mentioned. For those of you who are saying he's a bad or a terrible guy, he's really not. He's literally one of the sweetest guys you will ever meet, and honestly, he's pretty innocent. He is lightly on the spectrum and doesn't always know how to process emotion or understand why what he said was inappropriate. He also can't always take a hint and doesn't always know whether someone is joking around or being serious. Oftentimes when I make a joke, I make it obvious so he understands. Because of his being on the spectrum, he has a therapist that he has been going to ever since he was a kid. He apparently used to see her every month, but now as an adult he goes once or twice a year. My MOH had a fantastic idea and said I should book an appointment with my fiancé and his therapist to talk about this. I told my fiancé that it might be a great idea to talk about our relationship with her so we can learn how best to communicate as a future married couple. He said that was a great idea and we're going to book an appointment soon. Update 2. Thank you to all of y'all for helping me realize I'm not crazy for feeling this way. I was always told to suck it up and be thankful for what life gives you. So to hear all of y'all's explanations of why what I'm feeling is valid made me more confident to take action about this. I know a lot of y'all said to dump him, but I wanted to give him a chance. I wanted to make sure I went about this the best way I could, and if any of y'all disagree about my method, but I talked to his mom about it. Her and I are getting really close. She is so sweet to me and has even drove to pick me up and help me when I was having car trouble. I even hung out with her without my fiancé once. She let me borrow a jacket recently when I was stupid enough to forget one, and so I used giving back the jacket as an excuse to come visit and talk. I dropped off the jacket and she asked if I wanted to come on a visit, and of course I said yes. We talked for about an hour, and finally I had the guts to talk about it. I told her I felt like a piece of garbage for hating the Mossagat ring, and asked her whether she thinks I'm valid in me feelings or not. This woman got passionate. She immediately said that I was very in the right, and that when he showed her and his sister the ring, they apparently said, "Why did you choose this stone? I don't think this is what Opie wants." He apparently said Opie loves turquoise, so she'll love this. And it's not a stone, it's a diamond. His mom said she knew he was wrong. She even went on this passionate talk about why people traditionally choose diamonds over any other stone and jewel for engagement rings. She told me that people choose diamonds because they are the strongest stone in the world and can cut through and survive anything, so a marriage should be as strong and everlasting as a diamond. I told her that made me want a diamond, even more LOL. I asked her how I should talk to him about this. She said to be very honest with him before it's too late, and that he loves to hear the meaning behind things. She said if I tell him the things she told me about the meaning behind choosing a diamond, he'll understand even more. I was so thankful I talked to her. A couple of days later, I went to hang out with him at his place. I was so hesitant to talk about it, but when I finally got up the nerve to talk about it, I said, "I'd like to have a serious conversation with you. And I hope you'll understand where I'm coming from and listen." I told him about how I didn't understand why we went ring browsing in 3 stores only for him to buy a ring that was the opposite of what I said I wanted. I told him about how I hated the ring because to me it symbolized his cheapness, and that he didn't listen. I told him I was incredibly disappointed and asked him to explain. He listened very well and let me talk as long as I needed. He told me he had already bought that ring 1 week before we went ring browsing and that he took me out just to find out my ring size and to appease my mind. My flubbers were gassed. I told him that made no sense, and if he had already bought the ring besides finding my size, all that browsing was completely pointless and wasteful of my time and makes me feel even worse. He didn't understand why it was ridiculous. Because of his type of autism, sometimes I have to explain why people feel the way they do. So I gave him a thorough explanation as to why what he did was insulting, and it clicked, and I could tell he felt like an a-hole apologized and said he didn't think about that. He said he even felt really embarrassed for what he got me and felt guilty, but because I never said anything, he thought it was fine. I told him about how I looked up the ring, and that I was extra insulted it was $28, and he immediately got defensive and told me that wasn't true, and that he paid over $300 for it. I said then why is a ring that looks exactly like this one on Etsy for $28? He went to his email and found the confirmation of purchase email for when he bought the ring. And he apparently paid $345 for it. I apologized and he said, "Love, you shouldn't be the one apologizing. I know that I can be very cheap, and it's very understandable why you would believe I would pay that much for a ring. I always look for the cheapest option when it comes to everything. When it comes to you, I shouldn't be cheap. I love you, and you deserve the best." He immediately stood up and said, "Let's go find a jewelry shop." I started tearing up a bit cause it meant so much for him to say these words. We then went to a small business, not outlet, jewelry shop and looked at some gorgeous diamond rings. He, very nervously, said, "May I give a budget of $1,500? I said, "You know what? I don't want a whole new ring. You proposed to me with this, and I don't just want to throw the whole memory away. I would like to just replace the moss stone with a real natural, not lab-made diamond." I could tell that meant a lot for him to hear, and we told the jeweler to replace the stone with a diamond, and after about a 2-hour wait there it was. The diamond was $700, so in the end, he basically spent $1,045 on my ring. My beautiful diamond ring. I probably gave the biggest smile in the world, and when I put it on I gave him a big hug and said, "Thank you so much, love. You've made one of my dreams come true." He got teary-eyed, and this moment felt even more wonderful than when he proposed. It all felt real. I really felt like I was truly engaged and that he had taken a huge step when it comes to his cheap problem. It was definitely my favorite moment of our whole relationship. I later talked to him about getting financial counseling so that we could learn how to best communicate financially as a couple and how it might help him with his extreme frugalness. He agreed, and we have already set up an appointment to talk with a financial counselor who his sister recommended. We will be getting married in the fall. In a way, I'm thankful for this experience. I feel like this is one of those beautiful situations where good came from bad. Thank you to all of you who told me to be honest with him. I feel like our relationship has just grown so much from this, and I love him even more than before. I still have the moss agate stone and plan to make some kind of jewelry out of it, but for now, I cannot stop staring at my new diamond, and every time I see it, I get giddy. AITA for refusing because he used ring to propose? I hate jewelry. It doesn't matter what it's made of, it always causes me a lot of trouble and makes me want to scratch myself. Rings, earrings, bracelets, necklaces, just no way. The longest I lasted was 3 days, and I still have a scar on my wrist from that time. It's that bad. My boyfriend knows this. We've known each other for 10 years and been together for 6. I don't have any jewelry at home. I've always told him many times I don't want to change that. When we talked about proposing, I told him that if he gave me a ring or any jewelry, I would say no. I've told him many times that I would feel like he didn't know me if he did that, and that the only situation I could imagine a ring in would be if I proposed to him and he wore it. I felt like he understood me and that we were on the same page. And then Valentine's Day came. We had a nice day at the cinema, then a long walk, and we back home for dinner he made. He proposed when we were done eating. He knelt down and tried to put the ring onto my finger. I asked him what the fuck he was doing. He looked confused. He said something to me that pissed me off even more. Isn't that what all proposals are supposed to look like? I told him no. Then we had a long argument where he once tried to apologize and then convinced me I was overreacting. We ended up spending the night in different rooms, and he didn't come home the next day. He went to his parents after work. We haven't seen each other since, but our families and friends are constantly trying to contact me. Everyone is saying I'm overreacting and thinks I should just take this ring. But I really hate this idea, and I don't even know if I want to see him again. Edit. To clear something up, no, he has never apologized to me. He tried, but it was the typical "I'm sorry, but your feelings don't really matter" kind of thing. He literally somehow has no idea what he did wrong, and the only thing he has written to me since he still hasn't come home is that I should listen to my parents, who want us to stay together. When he tried to put the ring on me, I tried to pull my hand away, but he grabbed my hand tighter and kept trying to put the ring on. It wasn't funny to me. Before this event, we had many conversations about proposing. The last one was in December. He said that he got it, and I can trust him. He never said he wanted a ring or that it was important to him. All he wanted was the "will you marry me" part. That's what he told me. What kind of proposal did I want? I would literally take anything but jewelry, whether fake or real. Flowers? Sure. Nothing? Fine. Spoon? Fine. Dishwashing liquid? You know what? Yes, that's important, sure. People in the comments are talking about things like a tractor, a sword, or a tattoo. I'd take anything. Just not jewelry. The ring was silver with a blue stone. Also, sorry for all mistakes. I'm tired now and English is not my first language. Edit 2. I think that by writing this post and reading and writing comments, I got what I was looking for. For 10 years, I loved a man who respected my boundaries, talked to me, and shared his thoughts. The man who proposed to me was a stranger in my eyes. The situation wasn't funny. It wasn't silly. It was scary. At that moment, he wasn't my partner. He was a grown man who was forcibly holding my hand. He is allergic to strawberries. I would never give him strawberries. He knew that jewelry causes a strong reaction in me, and they make me scratch myself to the point of bleeding. He decided to force a ring on me. Then he never came home, but he made my parents, his parents, and our friends start writing to me and trying to convince me that I was overreacting and should stay with him. Again, I don't know this man. And I don't want to know him. I can be an asshole. He can be an asshole. We can both be assholes or neither. But those who said we weren't made for each other are probably right. Many of you put into words what I felt better than I did. Also, Tractor Girl, know that I'm jealous/J. Time to block everyone and then eat some sweets and cry over this 10 years and move on. And well, thanks everyone for the comments. AITA for refusing to forgive my father after he kicked me out and believed lies about me. For the sake of background, I, 20F, was 15, nearly 16 when the incident happened, so this was 5 years ago. I will be using fake names for privacy protection. My stepsister, who I will call Nicole, was 17, so now she's 22. My twin stepbrothers, Kyle and Chase, were both 14, now 19. I was around 5 when my birth mother passed away. She was sick for a while now. She died 10 days after my 5th birthday. Now you're all wondering where my father was during all this? He had been out and about cheating on my mother with his mistress now wife, who I will call Martha, not even caring how scared his young daughter was and that his beloved wife was dying slowly from a sickness I had no idea about at the time. It wasn't a few months after my mom died that my sperm donor married Martha, and that's when my life went down to hell. The second my stepfamily moved in, it was as if my mother never existed to begin with. The things that reminded my father of her existence were luckily put in storage by my paternal grandparents' insistence, near the town they lived in. Nicole and her brothers had instantly my father wrapped around their fingers, even from the moment he started cheating on my mom. You see, He wanted an obedient daughter and sons to keep his family name going. I was not an exception to his desires. For 10 years, I was left on the sidelines, trapped in the shadows, while my step-siblings received all of my father's attention and love, things I never got to have as a kid. When they had competitions, hobbies, or educational pursuits, he was there. But when I had mine, he wasn't there. If any of my step-siblings made one tiny mistake, it was met with, "It's fine. It's all good."
Me?
I was instantly punished and yelled at. Achievements? My step-siblings received pride and praise from my father and stepmother. I never heard a simple, "Good job," or even an acknowledgement. Nicole and her brothers soaked up all the attention and love from their parents, and they took pleasure in seeing me treated poorly just for existing. Thinking this was fun, they chose to make my life a living hell. From elementary school through high school, they ensured I felt isolated, alienated, and hated by everyone, except for a few friends I managed to keep by spreading rumors and bullying me to the point where I had to change schools to avoid being in the same classes as them. When I was 15, things went from bad to worse. I was busy doing homework from one of my classes when Martha suddenly burst into my room, screaming like a banshee. Before I could even ask what was going on, she was instantly hitting me in the face, slapping me and leaving scratch marks on my cheeks and near my eyes, which could have blinded me. I was able to get her off me just when my father stormed in with Nicole secretly smirking beside him. Seeing that smirk on her face told me she had come up with something dark, and when I was confronted, I was right. My father and Martha were yelling at me, saying how I was such a disgusting thief, and that they did not raise a harlot to steal from this family. Some of these things didn't make sense to me, but I knew what they were talking about. My father kept the family money in a safe in his office and only used the money for real purposes. He even had this safe locked up and had a pin only he knew and that I never asked for, so I had no idea where they got that idea from, aside from Nicole, who was still smirking. When I finally got the chance to ask them what gave them that idea, they had claimed that Nicole said she had seen me sneaking into the office and taking some of the money while they were out of town a few days ago and had hard proof that it happened. As a student studying in art class, I could tell her evidence was all edited to make it seem like I did it and all bullshit. No matter how many times I tried to tell them I never did that, my father and Martha would not listen to me, trapped in anger at my supposed sins. One day later, I was kicked out with my things, essentials, and clothes forcibly packed in my duffel bag and a couple of suitcases and warned to never come back if I didn't want to get arrested for financial theft. I was heartbroken, lost, and confused. I had to take the bus to head to my grandparents' place in their town, which is like a one-day journey. The second my Nana saw my face covered in dried, bloodied scratches and bruises, she was horrified, but not as horrified and disgusted as my grandpa when I told them how I ended up like this. The next thing I knew, my grandpa was calling for a family lawyer to have me put in their custody while my Nana comforted me as I cried. The legal process didn't take long, since my father had me legally disowned from his family and wanted me gone and out of his hands. To be fair, the fact that my father had never been there for me or my mom when she died was painful, but the fact that he had refused to listen to me when I had been telling the truth and never even wanted to hear me out hurt me the most, even today. For the next 5 years, my grandparents helped me get ready for the next stages of my life while guiding me in healing from the unforgiving hurt I've gone through. They paid for my education, which they helped me transfer from the school in my former town to another better school, and for my therapy. My grandpa even helped me find my own car for my sweet 16th birthday, which is used but still works. I was so grateful to them, given how I was scared of how they would react if I told them what had happened to me, but I was desperate and looking for another option. "Your granddaughter will always love you and hear you out," they'd tell me every time I'd thank them for how they helped me. Now, 5 years later, I'm already in college classes, studying for an art major, still living with my grandparents since they're getting old and need help with everything. Because they have been there for me every step of the way, I figured I'd return the favor. Now here's where everything falls into place. My father and Martha came over one day after 5 years of no contact, wanting to speak with me. At first, my grandpa was hesitant to let them in and was ready to call the police on them, but I told him to at least hear them out on what they wanted before doing anything. It took some pressing, but they explained what they were really here for. Nicole had made all of the story about me stealing money from the family office safe up to get me out of the picture, just as I had suspected. It was revealed at a party she and her brothers were having at my old home while they were out of town. A classmate I was not exactly close with had managed to record the moment when Nicole was laughing with a friend of hers when she was asked about me. She had boasted that she made up that story to teach me a lesson for being a snob a bitch, and that she was doing her father a favor by being rid of her for good. That classmate uploaded the video to the internet, exposing Nicole, and her lies soon crumbled down. Upon realizing what they had done, my father and Martha decided to send Nicole away to try and save face, but that pushed her over the edge even further. Not even the night before they were going to send her away, Nicole broke into the family safe and took half of the money before fleeing town. My father then begged me to come back home so that we could put this all behind us and be a happy family again. I suddenly burst into laughter at the mere thought of that. My father had me thrown out with no way to prove my innocence, cut me off, leaving my heart into several pieces that my grandparents had to pick back up, and now he is asking me to come back? All for what? So, he could pretend he never broke my heart and abandon me for his precious family from the beginning? I told him and Martha they must be so delusional to even think I would ever want to come back after they accused me of something I would never do, and then pleading for me to return after their golden child daughter robbed them blind. I said they got their wish. They got rid of me 5 years ago, so it's best they continue to think they only have one daughter and 2 sons. My father and Martha were close to yelling at me, but my grandfather cut them off and told them to leave, or he will call the cops on them for trespassing. Since then, I've been getting messages and frantic voicemails from my father and Martha, switching between begging for my forgiveness and to come back and calling me names that would make Ozzy Osbourne blush, saying that I owe them. As far as I'm concerned, I do not owe them anything. They had made their choices, so they need to live with it. Part 2. Can't believe I'm updating after all this chaos. I thought I would put it all behind me, just not the way my sperm donor wanted, but alas, they would never learn to let go for their own sakes. I looked through every one of your advice and blocked my sperm donor and Martha from my social media. I also went with my grandparents to the police station to have a restraining order placed against sperm donor and Martha, as well as their family, with the messages they had sent me as evidence. They understood their assignment and said that the courts would grant me one very soon. Grandpa sent a warning message to sperm donor and Martha that if they tried to come near me again, he'd make them regret it. You think all this will stop them? Fuck no. You see, in one of my classes, a classmate named Blair, 27F, comes from a family where she has very strong values and beliefs about being there for your family, no matter what happens and all that. Believe me, I appreciate her worry, but sometimes some boundaries do not need to be crossed. When she asked me about my family during a greet and meet when I first got into college, I only told her that my father, though still alive, abandoned me and that my grandparents are my only family now. She did not like that answer and started to badger me to reconnect with my sperm donor and find peace. I told her firmly to drop it, and that, along with a few instructors, got her to stop. I thought that would be the end of it, but boy was I wrong. For the next few weeks, I thought I saw a familiar-looking car a few blocks down from the buildings where I take my classes. They can switch between online and in-person. I forgot to correct that in my last post, down at the local grocery store my grandparents and I go to, even at the public library. Everywhere I go, I see that car, and I know for sure that's sperm donor's car. I could tell by the color and the model of that. Before class online started, the instructor asked me in private if I was alright. I was in early, so I told him about what was happening, and he told me he would get to the bottom of this. Before the lecture ended, he explained to the class what I told him and pressed for someone to speak up and answer now. I noticed Blair trying to act calm during all this and asked her if she had something to do with it, which got the instructor and the whole class's attention. She tried to deny it, but eventually, after being pressed by the instructor, she broke down and admitted she told sperm donor and Martha the location of the college I go to, as well as where I usually go on certain days and at certain times. When I angrily asked her how she got in contact with them, she tearfully answered that she found them in the face of books. She would not stop defending herself and saying she wanted me to have a happy family again. I was honestly disgusted and panicking at the thought of sperm donor or Martha, or maybe both snatching me in the open and taking me back by force, because someone would not mind their own business. The instructor was quick to dismiss everyone for the day, but not before sternly telling Blair that they were going to have a serious talk. Later on, he sent an email to me and my grandparents regarding the incident. He explained that Blair's actions would lead her to be expelled since breaching someone's privacy and putting them in complete danger, without even considering the consequences, are considered serious crimes. He ended the email by apologizing for what I had gone through and told me he was proud of me for stepping forward. My Nana and Grandpa were furious, not at me, but at Blair and sperm donor and Martha for going too far and overstepping boundaries. I was able to get a hold of the college office to not let sperm donor and Martha in under any circumstances, and that they are a danger to my well-being. I'm grateful they took this seriously and made sure they were blacklisted from entering the building. Can't leave out Nicole as well. Better safe than sorry. Good God, I hope this ends here. If not, I will update as soon as possible. Part 3. Can't believe this is getting wilder and wilder by the minute. It is like I am in a telenovela. Well, I did promise I would update if anything happens. The restraining order I've sent against sperm donor and Martha will be sent out to their place soon as the authorities and courts have promised. Blair was now not only expelled for exposing my number and locations to sperm donor and Martha, but also warned to stay far away from me since she is deemed a danger to myself and other students she had been harassing. Yes, that's right. She had been harassing students who had to cut off their own families for mental health reasons to reconnect with them and be happy again. A dorm roommate grew concerned for her and called a mental wellness check on her. It turned out she has bipolar depression, but she stopped taking medicine since she believed she was getting better and didn't need it anymore. Her words, not mine. Well, her behavior throughout all this pretty much says it all. As of now, she is in a hospital to have her mental health monitored so that she won't put anyone else in danger. At least, that's what her former dorm mate told me. She apologized for letting Blair go too far, but I told her it was not her fault, that Blair brought this upon herself. Another thing to worry about is sperm donor and Martha, and the flying monkeys they would have sent in if my grandfather warned his good friends not to let them get anywhere near me under any circumstances. They have good intentions, given that they know me well, so they spread the word across town, warning them about their friend's granddaughter's a-hole of step-family coming back for me by force, and soon enough, the whole town is on the lookout for sperm donor and Martha. I guess they got the message because I didn't see sperm donor's car anymore. But I started taking defense lessons and continued going to therapy just to be safe. Like I said, I did request, with my grandparents' help, for a restraining order against my stepfamily. However, that doesn't stop them from planning to send in flying monkeys. For the last few days, my grandparents and I have been getting spam messages and calls from random people telling me I'm a terrible person for not forgiving sperm donor and Martha and demanding I let them back in and give them a second chance. Grandpa and I had had enough of this and sent the following message on the face of books to the spammers. Hello, this is Opie. It's come to my attention that my former father has not told you the full story of me not forgiving my stepfamily. 5 years ago, I was abandoned and disowned by sperm donor after I was falsely accused of financially stealing from the family office without any solid hard evidence. They never let me explain myself before I was thrown out and left to wander the streets, fending for myself. There is a good reason why I do not want to continue contact with my stepfamily, and this is a good reason. I've already requested a restraining order, and if you don't want to be taken to court, I suggest you follow my example and step away from sperm donor and his family for your own safety and mental health. I had to proofread this message a few times and ask my grandparents to see what they thought and for any good wording advice. After I sent the message, I changed my phone number as well as changed my socials to private. I guess the message finally got through to the spammers because a few weeks afterward, a classmate I used to go to school with contacted me and apologized for not hearing me out before jumping to conclusions. After a few words of greetings were exchanged, they told me the full story. After the video of Nicole unintentionally outing herself went viral and Nicole ran away with the stolen money, my former town started questioning sperm donor and Martha about my whereabouts and what had happened. Sperm donor, of course, being the narcissistic egomaniac he was, made up a story about how Nicole just pulled a joke on me, but I was too sensitive to it, ran away to my grandparents, and cut off contact with them as if they hadn't thrown me out 5 fucking years ago. The message I shared on the face of books soon proved their suspicion. And there's more. Yes, more. Sperm donor and Martha were in huge debt with some dangerous people for a while now, a few months after Nicole stole half of the money from the family safe. They were desperate enough to trade me off to them in exchange for the debt to be forgotten. Of course, when they got my verbal response, they resorted to stalking me thanks to Blair giving them my info and had planned on kidnapping me in broad daylight, taking me back to my former town and giving me away to the debt sharks to possibly be used as a sex slave or maybe a victim in human trafficking just to save themselves. Although I was disgusted on the inside, I thanked the classmate for telling me this and said I appreciated their apology before showing everything to my grandparents. They didn't hesitate to call the lawyer who had helped them get guardianship over me and call for a date to take sperm donor and Martha to court. My grandfather was distraught, blaming himself for not raising him right and not getting me out of that unforgivable situation sooner. Later on, he apologized to me for letting me suffer the last 10 years under sperm donor's hands since my mom passed. I told him he and Nana had nothing to apologize for, that kids sometimes end up as terrible people even when parents treat them right, and that they're the best grandparents I could ever ask for. That seemed to make him feel a bit better. Though I have never seen my Nana so enraged in a long time. She quickly took the phone and dialed sperm donor's number. Before he could even greet her, she was already blowing on him. I swear her voice was loud enough to shatter the windows. She was calling him a terrible father, yelling how dare he betray his own living daughter and putting her in danger, that she and Grandpa raised him better than that. Sperm donor tried to defend himself, but Nana told him to shut his trap before she continued to yell and scold him. I guess that's one of the reasons Grandpa fell in love with her and married her. She then finished the call with that he was no longer their son and that if he dared try to come in and uproot my life, there would be hell to pay for. So to recap, sperm donor and Martha had me thrown out 5 years ago after I was falsely accused of financial theft, and I had to go to my grandparents' place, where they took guardianship over me. 5 years later, my stepsister's scam is exposed, so she steals half of the money from the family office, and sperm donor and Martha beg me to come back. My grandparents and I refuse, leading to stalking initiated by a nosy classmate and a restraining order placed against them as well as a plan to pay me off as a possible victim of human trafficking. I will update again should something happen. Part 4. It's been a wild ride, but things are falling apart. For sperm donor, Martha, and those who have wronged me anyway. Since I sent the message exposing the real reason I was gone, my former town has started scorning them to the point they became social pariahs. Sperm donor ended up losing potential clients for his business until he was forced to close them due to bankruptcy. The classmate who had contacted me, who I call Mason 20M, gave me every single detail I needed to know. Martha herself also ended up losing her clique because of how she had treated me and played favorites with me and her children, as well as being blacklisted from the spa place she regularly goes. Regarding my stepbrothers, I guess my father spoiling them so badly turned them into bratty monsters. Kyle and Chase ended up expelled from college after they were caught illicitly being sexual to pictures of girls they took pictures of without their permission, which resulted in them getting blacklisted from every private college and having to continue their classes online. Even online, no one would want to do anything with them. In the end, my step-family are now outcasts. Martha tried to deflect blame from herself on the face of books by claiming it was my fault that they ended up penniless and could go homeless soon, but her defense got shot down by the classmate who recorded Nicole's confession, as well as the friends I was able to keep throughout the 5 years. We were able to connect through vid calls and socials, who all then proceeded to call her out on her and her step-family's bullshit. This was all followed by comments from my former town who agreed with them pouring in until Martha took down her posts. My grandparents and I got a call back from their lawyer, who said that the date for the trial against my stepfamily is set for a few months, so we have plenty of time to get ready. Sperm donor, however, decided to try one last time to get me to come back home and tell everyone it was just a mistake and put this all behind us. But I was done. I was done hoping he'd change his mind and understand what he had done wrong. I was done with believing that he could change if he saw how much hurt he and his stepfamily had put me through. I was done with all the pain and torment he made me go through on my own without even having a hint of remorse. I was done with all the false promises he made me and never being there for me. I was done entirely. I laid it all out on sperm donor and told him what I truly thought of him. I told him how he was nothing but a pathetic excuse of a father and how much I had hurt because of his lies and false promises. I told him that I had given him too many chances to be a good father for once, and all it took was one simple lie from his precious angel of a stepdaughter for him to turn his back on me completely. I told him how hard it was for me to get out of bed, eat, or even move for the last few weeks since I got kicked out, how my grandparents had to urge me to step out of my room so I could at least shower and get some air. I told him how badly I wanted him to see what he had done wrong, but he never will. He will always have his stepfamily as his top priority, but I will always be second to none to him. I asked him if he really wanted me gone because I reminded him so much of the woman he loved so long ago. Did he really not love her like she does him? There was silence on the other end, but there was the answer I needed to hear. I told sperm donor it was over and to be ready to see me one last time in court before I hung up. I cried for almost a few hours before Grandpa took me out to a grandfather-granddaughter date to cheer me up. I don't know what I will do without them in my life, and honestly, I know they don't know what they will do without me either. At first, I thought it was over, but someone else isn't going to go away either. I hadn't spoken with Nicole since I got kicked out for 5 years. While my class was taking a break, I got a call from an unknown number. Without even thinking, I answered it. I swear to God above, I nearly vomited when I heard Nicole's sickly sweet voice on the other end. I was frozen on the spot for a moment, but I was able to end the call before she could say anything else. An hour later, after class was over, she called me again, but luckily, I was with my grandparents, so I wasn't alone in handling this. The moment I picked up, I asked Nicole what she wanted, and to get straight to the point. I could tell from the other end she wanted to change the subject, but there was no point in that, so she replied that she needed somewhere to stay until she got back on her feet. Honestly, if Nicole had been a good stepsister, I would have let her stay here without hesitation, but after all she's done to me for 10 years, that wouldn't have been a good idea. I flat out told her she doesn't have a sister, that's what she wanted, and to not contact me again unless she wants to risk getting arrested for harassment, and hung up before she could say anything else. As of now, I'm gathering every last bit of evidence I have on me for the court date. My grandparents are now rewriting their wills to make sure sperm donor, Martha, or anyone else siding with them won't get any inheritance. I'd be a fly on the wall to see the final stage of their downfall. I will update once the legal stuff is over. Part 5. Okay, so the legal stuff is over and done with, and it's been a roller coaster. As chaotic as it is, I'm just glad it's over. Well, here it goes. The day of the trial arrived. My grandparents and I had been preparing ourselves for that day, gathering any evidence we could find with sperm donor and Martha harassing us and demanding that I come back after 5 going on 6 years and then defaming me to anyone they could. Sperm donor and Martha. Oh God, I cannot describe how small their efforts are. It was as if they had just found evidence at the last second in a last-ditch attempt. And Nicole came along, too, mostly to defend her parents as well as try and prove herself innocent to the world. The judge called me up first, and I remained calm like Grandpa and his lawyer taught me. I answered every question asked of me with honesty and tranquility. I presented the evidence to the judge and jury as I explained how I had no intention of robbing the family office safe and never asked sperm donor for the PIN unless he asked me to check the safe. I also explained how I was out when I was supposedly accused of stealing the money. I was down at the library working on a rough draft for a literature essay, as I needed some quiet to think for ideas that day. Once I finished saying that sperm donor had me legally disowned from his family, therefore, I had no intention of going back, the judge nodded his head, as if he understood this, and thanked me before dismissing me from the stand. When Martha came up next, she started crying crocodile tears and came up with a sob story about how she and sperm donor were trying to treat me and her children equally, that she was only doing what was right for her family. She claimed the only reason she and sperm donor kicked me out was so they could teach me a lesson about defying them. But the evidence I had against them, the messages they sent to me saying that I owe them and that I should help them, the emails blaming me for having their reputations destroyed to shambles, the voicemails switching between begging for me to come home and demanding that I help them from the mess they made proved her story wrong otherwise. While she was making her speech, sperm donor tried to avoid looking at her. It was like they had rehearsed it so many times, but Martha seemed to have been desperate enough to get me back to forget about it. Sperm donor never got to the stand before the judge deemed her to be mentally unwell, but that made her go off on him, yelling that she was sane, that she and sperm donor were only looking out for me, but that made her seem more insane. Sperm donor tried to save her by saying that I should be straightened out, so I could be well enough to help them. That's the worst mistake he ever made. The judge face-bombed himself before stating that I was free to stay with my grandparents and not obligated to return to my former town. Martha instantly went off the rails. She screeched like a mad banshee and charged at me, only to be held by the guards as she kept yelling that I had to come back and help them and that I owe them. But I only responded that I don't owe them anything, and that I should have left before I was thrown out to spare me from the heartbreak for the next 5 years. Nicole get this rushed to the center in an attempt to defend her mother, saying that she did what she had to do to get rid of me, and that it was my fault their lives were destroyed. Of course, that made things worse for herself and her parents. With that, Martha and Nicole were soon arrested and put behind bars for 15 years with no chance of parole. Sperm donor was left with a 25-year probation, forbidden to ever approach me or my grandparents again, and forewarned that he would be put in jail alongside his wife and stepdaughter should he break that probation. Outside the courtroom, he confronted me and my grandparents one last time and told me that I was the worst mistake that ever appeared in his life, and that it was my fault that everything had gone wrong for him and his family. He said that if I had just agreed to come back and use myself as payment to his debts like a good daughter, he wouldn't end up with a destroyed reputation. I shot back at him that mistake or not, I was glad to be away from him and that he ruined his reputation himself. I told him that he is no father of mine and never will be. Grandpa joined in, saying that he was disgusted to see what kind of man he had become and sternly told him that he had not only lost a daughter, but also his parents. We both bid sperm donor farewell and left him to the mess he created a long time ago. The harassing phone calls and messages soon died down after that, with sperm donor now homeless and left without a family. His twin stepsons are now in prison in another country for sexual assault. His stepdaughter and wife are in jail in the other side of the countryside, and he was now broke and homeless after having to use his home and wealth as payment to the debt. I guess karma works in life. As for me, I'm still in therapy but healing well. I've put the past behind me one small step at a time, and I'm ready to make my own future. My grandparents still have their guard up, but made sure I know how to defend myself since they won't be around for me forever. I guess this is it for now. I appreciate the comments and support you guys have given me during this chaotic ride. I cannot thank you all enough for how much you helped me. Till we meet again.